the webinar series that Boris mentioned we initiated in November with this last presentation. I also want to thank a couple of other members of our team, Anita, Jeffrey, and Jean, for helping us support and set up this webinar. Without them, this certainly wouldn't be happening. I'd also like to thank our guests for joining us today. We certainly understand everyone has a very busy schedule. However, this is a very pertinent and relevant topic for where the life sciences industry is at today. And so with that, we'll begin our presentation. Today's presentation is entitled A Partnership in Traceability, GMP Processes, 21 CFR Part 11, and the Cryomed. You'll notice that the word partnership is a key word and a key theme that we highlight continually in this webinar presentation. It's very important that we think about meeting GMP requirements, supporting 21 CFR Part 11 requirements as a partnership. And as Boris mentioned, it's a partnership between an equipment manufacturer and its customer that has the GMP processes and that needs 21 CFR Part 11 support. So partnership will be a key theme throughout the presentation today. In terms of what we'll be covering today, it's very important that we're all on the same page and foundationally understand and define what the requirements are for GMP and what it means to meet 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. We'll give you a very in-depth overview of 21 CFR Part 11. We'll talk specifically about how we meet those requirements with the Cryomed. And we'll also talk specifically about the role that a customer needs to play in order to facilitate a clean chain of custody for data, which is what 21 CFR Part 11 is all about. Finally, we'll talk about the different roles within the partnership between equipment manufacturer and customers. In order to facilitate this webinar and this presentation, I've created a fictional scenario here. But as the subtitle suggests, this is a fictional scenario with real-world problems. So in this particular scenario, we have Robert Smith. He's a senior engineer at the fictitious XYZ cell therapy company. And you have myself here playing my everyday role as a senior product manager. So in order to get in the spirit of the theme in the presentation of a partnership, let's take a look at the scenario here. Hi, my name is Robert Smith with XYZ Cell Therapy Incorporated, and we are interested in learning more about the new thermoscientific Cryomed controlled rate freezer. Specifically, the features that are 21 CFR Part 11 certified. We are producing therapies at our GMP facility and storing the data electronically. So that is why we are interested in 21 CFR Part 11 specifically. So a response to that, and you'll see keywords here underlined in Robert's section and mine, 21 CFR Part 11, GMP, and storing data. So a typical response, nice to meet you, Robert. We're very excited to hear about your interest in the Cryomed, and we'll be happy to provide you information about the Cryomed. I would like to clarify, however, that the Cryomed is not certified to 21 CFR Part 11 because there is not a certification process per se. I can demonstrate how we meet the requirements, but compliance to the requirements for 21 CFR Part 11 requires a partnership between our Cryomed and your site's quality management system. So again, we'll really focus on the partnership aspect, and quality management system is a key term that you'll hear throughout the presentation as well. So recall in the scenario, Robert Smith of the XYZ Cell Therapy Company mentioned that his site is a GMP production facility. Now, what is GMP? It's a buzzword. We use it a lot. We use it a lot when we talk about manufacturing. There are really two key sources and definitions for GMP. One definition comes from the World Health Organization, while the other one comes from the US FDA. So according to the World Health Organization, good manufacturing practice is a quality system for ensuring that products are consistently produced and controlled according to quality standards. GMP is designed to minimize the risks involved in any pharmaceutical production that cannot be eliminated through testing the final product. So according to the World Health Organization, we have one definition of GMP. The US FDA defines GMP or cGMP when specifically referring to the FDA standard for GMP. The FDA says that the quality systems for US FDA regulated products, such as food, drugs, biologics, and devices, are known as current good manufacturing practices. So you may hear the terms cGMP and GMP used interchangeably. So it's important to differentiate, unless you're dealing with a customer that's specifically an FDA registered site that has an FDA approved product on the market, we're really referring to GMP. cGMP specifically deals with FDA regulated. However, really at the heart of both GMP and cGMP is this quality system. Now, we typically refer to a quality system in a production environment as a quality management system, or a QMS. That's an important abbreviation to know. You'll hear that a lot throughout the presentation as well. So in both GMP and cGMP, quality management systems are consistent where applicable with the QMS requirements established by the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, or you may hear it referred to as ISO. ISO 9001 and later ISO 13485 were developed as quality management systems around medical device manufacturing. So quality management systems are really sort of the central underpinning of a quality management system. So in order to say that you have good manufacturing practices, you must have a quality management system in place. When we talk about customers in a cell and gene therapy environment, for example, whether or not their therapy or treatment is FDA registered and certified for commercialization, they are going to want to be talking about GMP. They may be establishing their good manufacturing practice. They may be establishing their quality management system. So it's important to understand, people talk about GMP, whether they actually meet the requirements and definition of GMP or have a quality management system in place. So I just want to clearly define GMP in the context of this scenario. It's important to note that the Cryomed product is manufactured at a facility that is ISO 13485 accredited. So we are an accredited quality management system for the manufacturing of medical devices. So the next thing we want to define is 21 CFR. We all hear the term 21 CFR Part 11. You may have joined this webinar just because it talks about a topic that you may not really know anything about. There are a lot of assumptions about 21 CFR, so I want us to clearly define them here. CFR is an abbreviation for the Code of Federal Regulations. And the federal government of the United States established rules and regulations for all federal agencies. The rules and regulations collectively are all referred to as the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR. And the CFR is divided into 50 sections. We refer to those sections as titles. Title 21 is the section of the CFR that specifically applies to the US FDA. There are a few examples of 21 CFR requirements and parts here. 21 CFR Part 820 details QMS requirements for medical device manufacturers. 21 CFR Part 211 details the current good manufacturing practice for pharmaceuticals. And 21 CFR Part 210 covers current good manufacturing practice in manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding of drugs. So 21 CFR is a very broad section of the Code of Federal Regulations that deals specifically with all of the FDA's rules and regulations. So we're not covering all of 21 CFR. We're specifically covering 21 CFR Part 11, and that deals with electronic records and electronic signatures. 21 CFR Part 11 designates that electronic records and signatures are as valid as paper records and handwritten signatures. You know, if you think about the modern office space or the modern lab, there's not a whole lot of paper recording going on. Just as our daily lives have become digitized, so are records and signatures. So 21 CFR Part 11 specifically deals with electronic records and signatures. Again, as I mentioned, even if a customer site is not a GMP facility, they don't have that ISO certification, or even if they're not registered with the FDA, 21 CFR Part 11 can still be used as a guideline or be followed as a best practice for the management of electronic records and signatures. So it's important, you know, if a customer's not in that GMP space, that doesn't really take them out of the 21 CFR Part 11 conversation, right? Or if you are a customer here yourself on this webinar, you may be trying to develop, you know, best practices to support claims for 21 CFR Part 11. It's just a good rule to follow. And, you know, one other thing that's worth pointing out here is that the Code of Federal Regulations is specifically for the, established by the federal government of the United States. Well, no one here on this webinar except for myself is residing in the United States. But just like the ISO 13485 has become accepted as almost an industry standard in terms of a GMP certification, 21 CFR Part 11 is almost universally accepted as best practice for management of electronic records and signatures. And, you know, because of the market size of the United States for pharmaceuticals and treatments, a lot of people, regardless, or a lot of facilities, or a lot of our customers may be getting therapies that are, you know, in an FDA, you know, in phase 1, 2, or 3 of development with the FDA. So although it is specifically for the United States in terms of telling our government how the rules and regulations, this is a best practice when it comes to medical devices and electronic records and signatures. So we'll narrow our focus in a little bit more here on 21 CFR Part 11. Again, a reminder, this deals specifically with electronic records and signature, says they're as valid as a printed out piece of paper with a handwritten signature on it. It's important to understand that 21 CFR Part 11 is only applicable if electronic records are replacing paper copies. So some examples of that might be you release test protocols and get an approval. Well, you may do all of that electronically. You may get approval via email. You may get a signature in a PDF. It covers process and work instructions, design drawings, and software architecture documentation, specifications and request documents, records, for example, production records, as well as be a formal review and approval of protocols within an organization. There are 3 core sections of 21 CFR Part 11. We are going to focus specifically on Subpart B and Subpart C. Subpart A basically is, as it's described here in this flow chart, just provides scope, implementation, and definitions. Really, the heart of the matter is in Subpart B and Subpart C. This is really where the requirements live within 21 CFR Part 11. We talk about this partnership, this idea of an equipment manufacturer and an end user forming this partnership. Well, this is where the partnership becomes important. I want to make it very clear that the burden of compliance to 21 CFR Part 11 applies to both the GMP equipment manufacturer and the end user of equipment within a GMP or lab production environment. So the rules of 21 CFR Part 11, I have to demonstrate as a GMP equipment manufacturer that I meet the requirements and can support the claims to helping end users meet those 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. On the other hand, the end user has to demonstrate when they're audited by an official body, whether it's a GMP accreditation body or the FDA itself, they have to prove that they're maintaining records in a way that is in compliance with subparts B and C. 21 CFR Part 11 requires electronic data and signatures to be secure, to be traceable, and to be unalterable. That's really what that security of electronic records and signatures means. They must be secure, traceable, and unalterable. So in terms of the roles within the partnership, again, our scenario has the Cryomed manufacturer and XYZ cell therapy company. Just as roles and details of a partnership are agreed to, right, and formalized with a handshake, it's important that we understand that each party, and in this case, it's the Cryomed manufacturer and the XYZ cell therapy company, both of those partners must do their part to keep up their end of the agreement. And so what do I mean by that? So as the Cryomed manufacturer, we have an established quality management system, and that is verified and supported with our ISO 13485 status. The QMS, the quality management system that we have in place and that allows us to get that ISO 13485 accreditation, is used to drive all of our design decisions. It's used to document those decisions that we make, and it's used to manufacture the product. Our processes, from a manufacturing to an end-of-line test to a quality inspection and verification of information, is all documented, and we have a process for maintaining those records and preventing any unnecessary or unforeseen changes without having a documented reason why that happened. However, the Cryomed manufacturer obviously makes the Cryomed product itself, right? That's obvious. However, the Cryomed itself, once it's at the XYZ cell therapy company, creates and stores data. Every time a run profile is initiated, a batch of cryo bags go in with a treatment, a profile is entered, you freeze those bags down, there's data that is generated with each event, from a user logging in to a user selecting a profile, the user running a profile, any alarm that might occur during a run for whatever reason that may be, all that information is stored. All that information is stored in the Cryomed, and it's stored in a way that supports 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. So as a manufacturer, I have to manufacture the product according to our QMS guidelines, but I also have to make sure that the way the product, the Cryomed itself works, processes and stores data in a way that meets 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. So the output after a run is this file. This is an example of a PDF file that you see at the bottom middle of the screen. After each run, a customer can choose to export that run information. They could export that and print this PDF and give us a hand signature, but that's a paper record. We're not really that concerned about that. They can download the PDF file and save it to a USB storage device and then transfer that storage device to a PC, creating an electronic record. They can electronically sign the PDF. That's where 21 CFR Part 11 comes into play for the Cryomed. When we talk about XYZ Cell Therapy Company, their role in the partnership, similar to the Cryomed manufacturer, is to have an established QMS or quality management system. And that quality management system needs to be ISO 13485 accredited, and it's going to drive their equipment purchasing decisions. It's going to drive therapy production processes, and it's going to be used to manage electronic records. So the partnership comes in providing enough information from the manufacturer to the end customer about what they need to do in order to maintain the chain of custody and maintain 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. So focusing specifically on the Cryomed control rate freezer and its role within this partnership, again, on the left-hand side, we know now it's an ISO 13485 facility with a QMS system that's also driving end-of-line test and change management processes. That's on the building side. That's our process side. However, the Cryomed contains features that support 21 CFR Part 11, as we've discussed, by having a closed system. With an SQL database, there is no end user access. Members of the XYZ Cell Therapy Company cannot go in and query and access this database, and they cannot manipulate data within the database. They cannot change it. Once data is created, it's locked into the machine. And this closed system supports our audit log, our event and run log export features. Every event that occurs, every user login, every setting change, every profile that's created and run, all of those events are logged within the memory of the user interface. Similarly, the run log maintains a historical record of every run that has been completed with the Cryomed unit. So every run, whether it is your very first run or your 5,000th run in year 5, all of that information is stored in the Cryomed unit. 21 CFR Part 11, within some of the one of the subparts, you will find that you have to restrict access to a certain group of users using the Cryomed, and you have to provide them with a unique username and password. The Cryomed allows for that. No duplicated usernames or passwords, and even if someone leaves the company, the username and password will be saved on the unit for historical purposes, but someone in an administrative role can deactivate that username and password. So you have a very clear and clean chain of custody when it comes to who's had access to the unit and for how long and when they access the unit. Within the user interface, there's a capability to assign a different role to individual end users of the equipment. and that will also provide additional security to the integrity of the settings that you have saved on the unit. So different levels of access allow different levels of manipulation of the settings on the unit itself. Each run that is conducted with a Cryomed control rate freezer requires a unique naming convention. That's also a requirement of 21 CFR Part 11, that you're not overriding previous information. You're not doing a save as over a run file or a piece of information. It's all documented and archived. So you have to create a new run name every time you initiate a run. And then finally, part of the requirements of 21 CFR Part 11 are clearly identifying whether something is approved or whether it has just been reviewed. So approved means it's good to go. You can keep it. You're gonna put that production batch out. No issues there. If it's just a review, you want to see maybe there was an issue during a run, or maybe you just want to duplicate a run and it's not going to production, or you're doing a test, you can indicate that on the PDF file that's exported. And clearly identifying the purpose of a document is one of the 21 CFR Part 11 requirements as well. Boris, I've seen a couple of questions flash up in the chat, but I haven't caught the full question. Is there anything that at this point you want to pause and allow me to answer?
Okay, the first question is, can you a little bit more about the electronic signature that's required in the CFR 11 compliance? Yes,
so it's not, I want to be clear, an electronic signature is basically what we're trying to protect with 21 CFR Part 11. So just as you can digitally sign a PDF, right, and that is in most cases seen as valid as a paper document with a handwritten signature on it, that's really what we're talking about. If you are moving to a fully digitized process where you don't have a paper trail, or you're not having people handwrite signatures for approval, then you're going to need to meet the 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. If you have a paper trail and you're doing signatures, well, then there's a different part, or there's a different subsection of 21 CFR that details that. So that's why it's important to understand it only focuses on a digital signature or digital approval. So whether that's a time-stamped digital signature in a PDF file, or someone writing approved in an email and approving something, you need to maintain a clear chain of custody of those electronic records.
Okay, the second question is, does the data have to be stored in the system itself? If so, we will need to have a very high storage capacity for that. Or is it possible to store the data in cloud server, etc.?
So that's a great question. So from my perspective as an equipment manufacturer, when it comes to the way that files are stored, I'm only concerned about the way files are stored on the Cryomed unit. How a customer stores those records after it's been exported from a unit really depends on their quality management system. And I know that sounds like a generic answer, but it is absolutely it is the burden of proof, again, it rests upon the shoulders of the equipment manufacturer and our customers. And our customers, no matter how they choose to store their records after it's been output from the Cryomed, needs to meet the requirements of 21 CFR Part 11. So whether that's a cloud-based database that they have, there are 21 CFR Part 11 requirements that apply to an open system or an internet-based system like the cloud. So we deal specifically with the closed system on our end with the equipment, and customers may choose to store data that's output from the unit in a closed or open environment. You know, just like they're going to do their due diligence on equipment and making sure it meets their 21 CFR Part 11 requirements, they're going to do the due diligence, either demonstrate it with their quality management system or their steps to be certified as a GMP facility. They're going to have to justify that the means by which they're storing the information is correct and meets the requirements outlined in 21 CFR Part 11.
That's it, and keep going.
Okay, thank you. So I promise I am not going to read straight from this slide, so don't worry. There's a lot of information here, right? This is an important slide because this slide here and the next few slides will explain to you clause by clause how Thermo Scientific and the Cryomed justifies its status as supporting 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. And then, you know, we provide this justification, and this justification is part of our quality management system. This record is stored per the process of our quality management system. So on the left-hand side of this table, we have the 21 CFR Part 11 clauses listed out here, and we have them defined as exactly as they are defined by the US FDA. You'll notice the customer actions or responsibilities are blank here in the next few slides, and that's because I'm going to focus specifically on the Cryomed and how we support our claims to meeting 21 CFR Part 11. Basically, what we did as an organization, as a team that launched the Cryomed, we sat down with our research and development team, we sat down with our quality team, our regulatory affairs team, our sourcing team, and also I was involved in these discussions, and we went through line by line, clause by clause of 21 CFR Part 11 and provided a justification for how we meet each line item or clause within 21 CFR Part 11. And this is exactly the type of step that XYZ Cell Therapy would take in establishing their quality management system, supporting their ISO certification, and supporting their claims to meeting 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. So I just really quickly, you know, this first, the 21 CFR Part 11 subpart 10A specifically deals with validations of systems. And so as an example, I want to point out one of our lines of justification is our QAP 401 software validation process. QAP 401 is an internal abbreviation. It stands for Quality Assurance Procedure, and it's document 401 for us. And in QAP 401, we have a very detailed outline of the steps that we take in development of software and the validation process that we have there. So for this, what I want to demonstrate is we're referencing our QAP. Well, an auditor is going to come in and say, okay, you reference QAP, show me QAP. We show them our QAP 401. We show them all of the rules and regulations for software development. We show them the approval that it's had from the department heads, and we check the box, right? So it is a very time-consuming process to go through all of this. But these specific items here apply specifically to the Cryomed itself, and so we're providing these justifications. Another slide here that provides further justification I do want to point out here, a justification can be not applicable. It's a closed system in reference to an open system, right? So while some line items may require a lot of justification, you'll notice that everything might not apply, but you do provide that justification. So we'll skip ahead here to the roles within the partnership from XYZ Cell Therapies perspective. Again, it's a GMP facility with a QMS. In this scenario, they've done all of the clinical trials and gone through all of the development phases with the FDA, and they have approval for their therapy. The way that they're going to be able to support and maintain their claims to 21 CFR Part 11 are by showing that they have an electronic signature policy in their quality management system that details how they manage electronic records and how they get that approval. They're going to clearly define what each person in the production facility's role is in terms of their department, and it's going to document it. They're going to provide access and training to the unit to all of those employees that are signed up within those departments. And they're going to document and have verification that each person has been trained. They're going to have to, when it comes to the Cryomed, they're going to have to come up and document a unique naming convention for the run files, as each run file requires that unique naming convention. And then they're going to have to establish a policy around the PDF file type exported from the Cryomed. What are they going to consider something that's a run for approval or just run for review? So they need to have all of this documented. They need to have traceability, and they need to show proof that what they have documented, what they say they're going to do, for example, they're actually doing. In the next slide, you'll see a little bit more information than we had on the previous slides. Again, kind of going through the parts of 21 CFR Part 11. Some of 21 CFR Part 11 does not apply at all to the Cryomed manufacturing space, and it is solely the customer's responsibility to manage those clauses. We have a guidance document that we created in support of the launch that details all of this and is available on a per request basis to you all if you need this. But really what this shows is that there are specific clauses that deal with the XYZ Cell Therapy Company. For instance, 1110 subpart J is a regulation that refers to the responsibility of the user and should be maintained using proper protocols and documentation. And that is the establishment of and adherence to written policies that hold individuals accountable. Now, as a Cryomed manufacturer, it's not my responsibility to tell my customer what type of process they need or how to establish it. That's up to the customer site and their QMS system, but they'll provide that justification. Similarly, when I ship a Cryomed unit out, how the end user uses it at that point is up to them. They're going to have to create a process for managing users' access to the unit. So you can see here, there are some things that apply only to the XYZ Cell Therapy Company, while there are other things that apply only to the Cryomed manufacturer. Here's an example of where both XYZ and the Cryomed manufacturer must meet a requirement within 21 CFR Part 11. So when it comes to the ability to generate accurate and complete copies of records in both human readable and electronic form, suitable for inspection, review, and copying, there is a burden on XYZ and there is a burden on Thermo Scientific as the manufacturer of the Cryomed. So as you see, this idea of a partnership is really coming to fruition in that there are clear rules and responsibilities that a customer must meet just as there are clear rules and responsibilities that the manufacturer needs to meet. Here's some more examples here. For the sake of time, we'll skip through these. So again, kind of reflecting back, clear rules of engagement for the manufacturer, clear rules of engagement and requirements they must meet for XYZ cell therapy company. From an equipment manufacturer side, I've got to be able to provide justification for compliance to my auditors. And I need to communicate the roles and responsibilities that XYZ needs to take over in order to maintain 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. XYZ is going to have documented processes, and they're going to have to accept their role within the partnership with the Cryomed manufacturer. They have to physically do things with the outputs of the Cryomed control rate freezer. So they're signing up for something, and we as the manufacturer are also signing up as well. So as Boris mentioned, we just recently launched the brand new Cryomed 2.0 controlled rate freezer. It's a much updated and upgraded unit from an exterior perspective. We've updated the exterior design and included an LCD touchscreen user interface. One thing that I want to point out, if you are currently a customer and have one of the older generation of the Cryomed control rate freezer, the thermal printer is now an optional feature with this new product. In terms of performance, and this is very important, especially for customers in a GMP space, equipment needs to meet the specifications that the manufacturer claims, number one, but number two, you need to demonstrate that you are, as a manufacturer, you're not changing a whole lot of stuff, right? Because everything is documented that XYZ is doing. Therefore, if we make a big change, they're going to have to make a big change. So from a performance perspective, the way the new Cryomed actually cools samples down, it's the exact same as the legacy platform. It's still an LN2-based system with an air handling system and liquid nitrogen injection ring. We're offering the same interior capacities as the legacy models as well. So again, you know, electronic records are very important, but also maintaining performance and providing repeatability are also going to be very important as well. And with that, we have a few minutes left over here for questions. And I'll say thank you very much for your attention this morning, and thank you for your time, and I look forward to being able to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you, Chase, for your detailed information. For the audience, if you want to ask your question, you can either type in the chat box or Q&A section chat box. If you want to ask directly, maybe you can also send me a signal so that I can unmute you. Question? Okay, so first question. Right now, the Cryomed cell part even compliance is only cell declared by Thermo Fisher Scientific. So, is there any criteria or to make that claim, and also what is it possible to have a third party to certify that?
Yes, Boris, that's a great question. It is possible to have a third-party organization sign off on your justification to meeting 21 CFR Part 11. You know, typically it almost is it's a relationship that's one of consulting. So you'll hire a consulting firm to help you walk through all of the clauses and write out your justification. and they'll have a lot of experience. We utilized a third party to help us from a consulting perspective as well, but we didn't get there. We did not complete that contract with them in terms of getting any sort of certification. There's not really a third party that's established itself as the dominant player. And in the end, you have to provide justification and pass an audit when an auditor is on your site. And we have a lot of experience doing that. So that's why we went ahead and self-certified and made our own justifications and claims. And that's perfectly acceptable. If you want to save money, that's a great route. But there's no real certification, right? So if we think about certifications, when a product is approved by the FDA, there's a paper trail, right? You can go to the FDA's website and look up that company. There's no real certificate or stamp of approval that says this is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. You have to demonstrate that at the time of the audit to the auditors. So that's a really good question and something that's important to clarify.
Okay. The second question is, you also in your presentation you talk more a lot of time you talk about a company that is the customer or the user of the equipment needs to do to comply with the CFR Part 11 compliance. That means it's a partnership of the equipment supplier and also the end user. So what kind of suggestions you would like to suggest the user to implement that so that they can fully comply to that requirement?
So, you know, a lot of the prerequisites for making these claims we discussed, but I think a good way to summarize it would be whether a customer's site is an ISO 13485 GMP accredited site, or whether they're working towards that. What you really need to do is establish a quality management system. And there are third parties available as well that act as consultants that can help you with that, taking those steps to meeting those requirements. It's important to note that good manufacturing practice, even though you can be certified as ISO 13485, really there's no one specific rule for a quality management system, right? One company may have a completely different quality management system than the other. But what you have to do is demonstrate traceability to the decisions that you're making and document those and maintain those records. It's really a complete process and mindset, really, when you talk about a GMP site. So it requires a lot of planning in order to get GMP and in order to maintain that accreditation year in and year out. However, you know, a lot of customers that may be working towards those accreditations or maybe are in, you know, phase 1 through 3 with the FDA are taking the steps and following the documentation procedures and outlining that detail. You know, you can find a partner to do that. Really, it's, you know, there are a lot of experienced professionals out there that have experience with QMS systems. So it's a combination of making sure you have the right people with the right experience on your team and having a good documented plan that you adhere to.
Okay. The next question is, in your presentation, you also talk about a closed system and also an open system. What is the definition of that? And you also mentioned about the SQLite3 database that embedded in the user interface, and said that it is a well, people cannot access and also amend the data in the database. It's a closed system. And is there any data security claim for that database?
Yeah, those are really good questions. So Josh Lewis did a really good job of presenting and defining open and closed systems in his webinar. So I'll take an opportunity to plug Josh and say, you know, if you have an opportunity to go back and listen to that webinar presentation, I would suggest that. But basically, the difference between an open and closed system is, you know, a closed system is something that essentially does not have access to the internet, right? There's not an open access to it. So our closed system is password secured. Only our design engineers have that, and you have to have that in order to access it. We don't provide access to the database to our customers to manipulate data. You can only export data from the database. In terms of you know, data security claims, there's, you know, if you have a specific program that you purchase, you might be able to make data security claims. But SQL is a pretty common development platform for closed systems, and is widely accepted. So, you know, there may be some data security claims that you can make, but in terms of certifying those claims, it really requires justification. There's no third-party certification for that, Boris.
Okay, I think the last question is, you mentioned that the Cryomed control rate freezer by using the user interface itself is CFR 11 compliance, and not the PC software interface, and also the new Cryomed also has the Wi-Fi connectivity function to upload the data into the cloud. So is there any timeline that you can expand the CFR 11's compliance claim to the PC software and also the Wi-Fi cloud storage of the data?
Right. Another really good question. So you are correct, and I want to be very clear. The Cryomed control rate freezer, the new product that we just discussed, it does have access. There is Wi-Fi that sends historical run information up to the ThermoConnect platform, and users that are remote from a specific location can review those files. However, we're not making 21 CFR Part 11 claims around the cloud. We are only specifically making them on the PDF file export version of feature of the product. It would be possible in the future, you know, to have a cloud-based system that supports 21 CFR Part 11 requirements. You'd need to meet the open system requirements for that. So it is possible, but it is not currently a claim that we make on the new product. Similarly, the PC interface software is something that we're not making any claims around 21 CFR Part 11 just yet. We had to make a strategic decision, right? And what we wanted to do is introduce a new control rate freezer, the first one we've had in 21 years. And we wanted to focus specifically on the UI and how it, and the export feature in supporting 21 CFR Part 11 with that. So the cloud is convenient. The PC interface software is a convenient tool to use for operating the unit, but we can't support any claims around 21 CFR Part 11 on those. But we do provide it with the UI and the PDF file export, and, you know, provide guidance in this document to our customers for, you know, how to manage that. So it would certainly be fantastic to have, but in terms of having a fully cloud-based, wireless, 21 CFR Part 11 compliant product, right? That doesn't exist on the market. It's tough to do, right? There's a reason it doesn't exist yet. So, yeah.
Okay, I think it is almost time to end our webinar sections. Please notice that if you want to have the PPT file of today's webinar, you can contact the local Thermo Fisher scientific representative. And this section is also record. So if you want to have the video file and then to review today's information, you can also contact your local Thermo Fisher scientific representative. Okay, thank you for your attendance and your patience in your contribution, and especially thank you, Trace, your detailed information and your presentation. Hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.